I'm very pleased to welcome to the studio two special guests on the programme with a big night ahead of them, after they've left here, that is, because they'll be appearing at the Broadway Cinema with a special showing tonight of the film Dead Man's Shoes, and we have director Shane Meadows, Nottingham lad. Hello.
Hello there.
Good to see you again, because we spoke at the time of the release of Dead Man, Once Upon a Time in the Midlands.
That's right, yeah.
And we've also got one of your cast, Toby Kebbell. Hello, Toby.
Hello, how you doing?
Also Nottingham lad, or from around these parts.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Now, Dead Man's Shoes, it's a film that has been incredibly well received. Well, I don't mean to say incredibly as if people wouldn't receive your films well, but it has got great critical acclaim, and it's getting really good public acclaim as well. As a sort of straw poll, I looked on a couple of websites where they sort of show reviewers from the public world and from the...
I know, yeah.
And everybody's saying it's good. It's because often a film will either appeal to the public or the critics, but not both. So how have you managed to achieve this sort of wide appeal? Is this just the Shane Meadows experience?
It's been a funny one because, I mean, after sort of making Once Upon a Time in the Midlands and making it for the highest budget I'd ever had, although, you know, a lot of people, I suppose, quite like the fact that I'd stepped out and made a more commercial film, from my own perspective, I kind of missed that excitement of making films a little bit more on the hop. And I mean, my very early films like Small Time and Where's the Money Ronnie, I'd kind of lost touch with them a little bit, and so from my point of view I decided to go back to that process and decided to sort of strip all the luxuries away. There was no caravans, no trailers on this set. You know, if you weren't on set, you were sat on the grass outside, and we shot it very, very simply, very cost effectively, and it's one of those things, it's ever so funny, by almost trying to make a more focused film, it seems to have had more universal appeal than my last film. It's weird how these things work out, but it seems to have on Dead Man's Shoes.
Let's just listen to a short extract from the film now.
What are you doing, lad? That's my concern. Not needing my house. Where are you staying? Watson's Farm. Gonna come see me, are you? Maybe I will. You're not afraid of me, are you? Making me very nervous, Richard. Well, you should be.
I mean, just listening to 20 seconds there, I'm starting to feel a little bit scared of this film, because it is a fairly savage tale.
Yeah, and I mean, the character that Toby plays is the catalyst for the whole story. I mean, you know, basically, myself and Paddy Considine had worked together on a director-actor relationship before, but this is the first time that we've actually co-written something. And the character that Toby Kebbell plays is one of these. Basically, the whole story revolves around his involvement in the film, and the beautiful thing about Toby's involvement was that initially the character Toby was playing was meant to be in his sort of mid to late 30s. The guy that Paddy Considine comes back to a town basically from being in the army, being away for 10 years, and this gang of drug dealers and small-time crooks, there's obviously something that they've done to his brother, and that he comes back to avenge, and so that's kind of the nature of the story, almost like a revenge thriller. And originally the guy was meant to be in his late 30s, and the actor that we'd got to play that decided, because he'd got special needs, this character, that he didn't think he was going to be able to pull it off. And Toby came in with about 2 or 3 days before we started shooting. We'd lost a main member of cast, and I'd seen Toby in the workshop at Carlton through Ian Smith and had been massively impressed and wanted to work with him, but there just wasn't a part of that age group, and so Toby came across and kind of did what Dustin Hoffman did in sort of 8 months on Rain Man. He did that in 2 or 3 days.
Wow. Toby is here as well then. So was it a part that you enjoyed getting your head around? Because it sounds as though it was quite a challenge from an actor's perspective.
Yeah, for sure. As an actor, you go in there and all you want to do is make something believable, but when it's an improvised piece, there's no script, there's an idea, and you're basically coming up with a character on the spot, and you've got 3 weeks to shoot the whole thing. It's a nerve-wracking experience, but you're in safe hands. You're working with Shane Meadows and Paddy Considine, and they've already collaborated with the writing of it, and they've also now collaborated in that you see them working together, and they spark off each other, and it generates just a pleasant, funny vibe on the set. So it's sort of everything was relaxed and made easy for me as much as it could be, and just to focus on the job of giving Anthony the best things I could.
Yeah, yeah. And he is, as you say, a kid with special needs who is adopted by this drugs gang, but then they treat him as a plaything, as a.
Sure, it's one of those situations where, you know, where you're at school and there's the slightly simple kid who's in the lowest sets of all the classes, and you find yourself teasing him without actually meaning to be cruel, and things often get out of hand, and that's really what I felt my character was. He was an impetus to let things get out of hand, you know, by taking advantage, you know, which is the cruelest side of people, you know.
And you mentioned improvisation. A lot of it's made up at the time, is it, Shane?
Yeah, we wrote a 20 or 30 page script. I mean, the basic backstory to how the film came about was that I met the producer of the film, Mark Herbert, at the end of February, and he wanted to release some of my short films. And he'd started up Warp Films underneath the banner of Warp Records, and they'd made a short film with Paddy Considine, and it went on to win a BAFTA. And so they basically approached me as someone that they wanted to work with further down the line, and were talking about releasing some short films. So I showed them 2 or 3 shorts that I'd made with Paddy, and he was like, Jesus, these are great, how long did they take? And I was like, well, me and Paddy just went out in a day. I'd give him a wig and a set of false teeth, and we'd go off and make a film. And I think me and Paddy had taken them probably a little bit for granted, that we'd go out in a day and improvise this story. And I was saying to this guy, Mark Herbert, you know, look, I'm in this position where I've made this film with a lot of famous people, and maybe it wasn't quite as satisfying because I didn't have the same creative control. And he was saying, well, maybe the answer is in what you and Paddy have been doing. It probably needs a little bit more thought. But maybe, the problem with Once Upon a Time in the Midlands, from my perspective, was that I had to write the script for 12 months. And that's not really me, that's not what I'm about. I made all my early shorts in Nottingham, literally, from instinct and from the stomach, and that was what getting back to this film was all about.
And, of course, it must mean that actors really get involved in the film. They're not just delivering the lines and looking to the camera, they are actually really becoming the part. And I mean, through the years there have been many famous film directors who use improvisational techniques, but had you done much of that, Toby? Because you'd been at the Carlton TV workshops, hadn't you?
Yeah, I mean, basically workshop is, for me, was an experience of going down on Wednesday nights, sitting around in a circle, and you stand up when someone's lost a shoe and you found the shoe, and you create a story from there. And often they'd elaborate into huge tales that Jack and Ori would be proud of, and sometimes they'd stop within seconds, you know. It was that's the nature of improvisation. But having talked to Paddy, who worked with Shane before and obviously has done hundreds almost of shorts with Shane, it's the way Shane is. It's sort of he gets you involved, whether you've got lines to say or not. He's very much hands-on, and it helps you immensely as an actor, because you then forget about all your anxieties of actorish things. But yeah, the improvisation thing, I think, for any young actor is the way forward, because scripts, we can't all find Tarantino scripts in our yards and stuff. So you've got to sort of make it up yourself and
kind of dig deep inside of it.
For sure, mimic people you see on the bus. Mockery and mimicry. There's a thin line, and they're almost identical beings.
But if it was as simple as that, if it was just a case of pointing the camera at somebody and saying, "Oh, imagine this," and I'll shoot it, and we'll get a great film out of it, that's never going to work. So it must be difficult for you, Shane, to kind of know where you're going with the film. Surely, if Toby comes up with a brilliant improvisational line that takes you somewhere else, do you cut it? Do you keep it in and think, well, I've now got to keep that in and work something to make that fit? Do you see what I mean? It could become out of control almost.
Yeah, that's always a possibility. But I mean, at the end of the day, improvisation, people have this idea that improvisation is literally turning the camera on and then almost rehearsing on camera. Whereas what I've always done with actors, and I think this is probably what gives me that control, is that I go on set, 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. You'll get up, you'll go in to have breakfast with everyone, and I'll walk onto set with only the actors. I don't let any of the crew come anywhere near us until we've rehearsed something that we're happy with. And so that relationship's unchanged since I made the very first Where's the Money Ronnie, where I had that relationship specifically with actors where I could put them at their ease, rehearse something that I wanted to shoot, and then when I found something that I wanted and had got it, because I always know the overview of the story. Sometimes, and especially with Toby's character, I mean, it grew out of all proportion, because I was putting Toby in against Paddy Considine, who's being, there's comments going around now banging him around as the new Robert De Niro, and for Toby to go in his first film and to stand alongside Paddy, I was thinking to myself, well, maybe, it'll be great if we just get the character to just, work a little bit, but it grew and grew. So yeah, it does grow on set, but I think the key really for me is that I always go on, it's improvisation, yes, but at the same time it's rehearsed, and so what actually gets put down onto film in some way has been rehearsed, and so that's what gives us a certain amount of control.
We'll talk with you up until 6:30, if that's okay. Can you stay till 6:30?
I'm going to Wagamama's afterwards, so if you can get me there by 2:15, I'm game.
Get some noodles down you, and then it's off to the Broadway for tonight's screening, 8:30. It's Alan Clifford with you until 7 o'clock this evening. My guests in the studio, Shane Meadows, film director, and one of the stars of his new film, Toby Kebbell. And Dead Man's Shoes is the film. It's a nationwide release. Is it going to go international as well?
Yeah, we've got, for the first time, I've sold in Japan. So I'm like Bros now, I'm big in Japan getting. Because this time round with the film, we had a distribution company on from the beginning, and it's made an enormous difference. We've actually created a graphic novel of the film, which is like a 70 or 80 page version of the film in graphic novel form, and the Japanese love all of that stuff, so it's been sold in most places.
Yeah, I wonder what they would make of Notts County, if you tried to tell them the story of Notts County Football Club, because you're a passionate supporter?
Very much so, yeah, and we've, it's just been, I mean, I joined, I didn't really watch football until I made 24/7. And there was like some people's favourite pieces from Nottingham from 24/7 is of an actor who's actually like a sort of a desperate Notts County fan. It was when they were in the 3rd division, which was
glory days.
Yeah, glory days. But it was when Sam Allardyce was managing them, and I went down to a game almost just to sort of appease him, because although he played a fan, he was as obsessional as that, and I went down and started watching them then. Sam Allardyce took us out the bottom division, got us into the 2nd, then we actually got to the top of the 2nd, and he got the job at Bolton, and it's been a bit of a downward spiral ever since. So, I mean, money-wise, I know that they're struggling, and so tonight I think a lot of the profits, or all of the profits from tonight's screening, are going to the club, and I'm going down into town tomorrow to buy the new turquoise away strip, because that looks better, doesn't show me boobies up so much.
So Notts County benefiting from tonight's screening. Now, just talking a bit about the workshop, the Carlton TV, was it children's TV workshop?
Yeah, it's now been taken over by Granada, so I'm not entirely sure of the actual title of it, but it's central to me, and it's central to anyone who's been there. And it's
been important in Shane's films, haven't you? You've gone there before for talent?
For everything. Yeah. I mean, apart from Small Time, which I kind of made with the people that I was working. I was in Sneinton, and it was literally one street in Sneinton that we made everyone with. When I went to make 24/7, I had a list of about 20 or 30 drama schools to go to in the UK, and I went to the Central Workshop, as it was at the time, as the first place. And because it was local and it was easy, and I met Ian Smith, and I picked every single other cast member that I needed from that one workshop, and I've never had to go anywhere else since. I mean, Romeo Brass, both the young boys were from there. Once Upon a Time in the Midlands, the young girl Finn Atkins, and Kelly, they both came from the workshop, and the 2 young kids. So, and Toby was, the last great find from there. So,
yeah, what's the future with all the changes in Carlton and being taken over and ITV, that sort of thing?
I'm not sure of the future. It's, I mean, I was speaking to Ian recently, and he was telling me that they've got funding for the next couple of years from Granada, because they obviously see the potential of the workshop. But Ian has a magical talent of spotting great talent, and the shame would be if it started to need private funding, as in you had to pay a fee. It would really close off to people like me, who had no money and really could never ever afford a proper drama education. Can
you remember the point in your life when you said, I'm actually going to go along to this workshop? There must have been an epiphany almost, that you were going to try and make something of this talent that you could feel you had.
Yeah, for sure. It was Johan Myers, actually, a guy who was in 24/7 and A Room for Romeo Brass, and a friend of my brother's. He was working at the time at the Broadway and saw a play of mine at school and said that I should audition, which I did do. They said I was too old, and then the year later they sort of let me into the reserve group, and I got on so well, and they allowed me into the actual group. But it's a great place. It's a place where you can learn tons without it being forced down your throat, and if you don't want to, you can sit back and you know, waste what's offered.
And there's probably something to be said for just doing that, though.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, for definite. You know, it's an incredible place to be. The competition to get in there is purely talent based, so it's a very difficult place to get into.
Well, let's hope it does continue with that sort of lack of restriction on entry, just talent deciding who can get there or not. Back to Dead Man's Shoes then, Shane. The films that you've made in the past have featured a lot of Nottingham as the backdrop. This one, you've moved sort of into Derbyshire for this one, to Matlock.
Yeah, we went out to Matlock because, I mean, Dead Man's Shoes was inspired quite heavily by my upbringing in Uttoxeter. And I suppose that if the first 3 features that I made celebrated my life in Uttoxeter, this probably looks at the slightly darker side of the town. And, you know, they've got... it was this thing that cities, we all think of cities as, you know, with the drug problems and the gun crimes in cities, and we tend to forget about the smaller places. I mean, the drug problems in rural areas and small towns are actually almost harder to defeat than they are in bigger cities because, I mean, lots of friends who I grew up with have got involved in drugs and find it impossible to actually get out of that way of life because you can't move them anywhere within that town that they won't bump into exactly the same people. And so I'd been going home a lot and going back to this place, and people drive through Uttoxeter, and it's a beautiful little market town, but if you go there by night and you go up the Bronx as it's known, they've given it a posh new name, but it's still known by everyone in town as the Bronx, and it's one of those kind of places that has quite big problems, and as you mature and you become an adult, you realise that not everything's as funny or as glamorous as it was when you were a kid, and I suppose that's why, you know, Matlock was the first place that reminded me of that. You know, there was this really mad council estate in Matlock that was almost hidden from view, and if you actually drive half a mile in, and I'm sure there's a lot of places like that basically they look really pretty, you go through, you maybe stop at the Samuel Johnson monument and you remember it as a beautiful little place, but and that's kind of why we chose Matlock, and we chose to get out of Nottingham.
And has that surprised people in a way that you know, you can do a drug story based on a small market town rather than a big city?
Yeah, I think there's plenty of people out there making kind of gangstery, big city, gangstery, drug-type stories, and I've never, you know, I film my own niche, which is, you know, the thing that always separates my films is that I care about the people that are in them, you know, and so, and the truth is, I grew up in a very small market town, and it's funny with Uttoxeter, I keep thinking I'll make one about something that isn't based from there, and every time I try, I've still got about another 600 characters to get through, so I think I'm going to be there for a while yet.
That was kind of going to be my final question, is where next? You know, what's the future? Have you got more stories of people that you've known over the years to bring out, and you know, how much longer you can keep tapping this well of stories? You seem to have 10 times more than anybody else I've ever met.
Well, I mean, there's, as I speak at the moment, there's like 4 films that are all being developed at the same time. The lifelong sort of project, the dream project, like My Gangs of New York, if you like, is a project called King of the Gypsies, which I made a documentary about a gypsy bare-knuckle fighter about 10 years ago, and he's a very close friend of myself and my family. My dad boxed for him in the 70s, and I've always wanted to tell the biopic of his life. It's an incredible story, and in between that and trying to get the money to raise for that, I mean, I've got projects ranging from my first female lead, which is a project called Mary, about a young girl who comes through the care system, ends up a prostitute, you know, the normal traps of that kind of life, and how she finds salvation. I've got a comedy that I'm working up with Paddy Considine at the moment, which is called Le Donk, which is about a guy who was a successful rock musician who's been dropped by the record label and has had to go back into the building trade. There's a whole massive array of projects in there, but all very much still based with people from the working classes and people that have inspired me.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting a chance to see Dead Man's Shoes. I haven't had the chance yet, and it's annoying me that I have not found the time, but I will, I promise I will. The earlier works that you've done, is that now available on DVD?
Yeah, a lot of, I mean, there's talk of Small Time's going to be coming out on DVD, hopefully at the same time as Dead Man's Shoes actually makes it onto DVD. Romeo Brass and 24/7 have been for a while, and my early short films, I'm in discussions at the moment to see whether I can get maybe 15 or 20 shorts out.
I look forward to that. And Toby, I wish you well for the future. You've got other plans lined up?
No, I'm plastering at the minute. But,
there you go. Yeah. Could be the basis for the story.
Yeah,
the
for
rock
sure,
musician who goes back to the building trade. We've got the actor who's the plasterer. I can see a part in that film for you already. You've got both skills. He can act, he can plaster.
Bless you, cheers.
And we'll let you get off and get some nosh and have a good night tonight at the Broadway. 8:30, the screening of Dead Man's Shoes. It's been an honour and a privilege to meet you both, Shane Meadows and Toby Kebbell. Thanks for coming to see us.
Thank you.